T-minus 3, 2, 1, 0.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Launch Sequence Podcast. I am your host, Space Tomato, and this here with me is a picture. It's going to be a good old one-person stream today. No, I'm kidding. AAK625 is with me today. Say hi.
Hello.
Hello. Thank you for joining me, dude. This man, he's the beacon guy. You can tell by his picture. Literally the beacon guy. AAK625 is the most medically oriented player that I know in Star Citizen. And the first way I discovered you was through, I was doing a video research and I think trying to find medical beacon footage because it's just such a lame and stupid and unnecessary form of gameplay. I never would have done it.
All right. Thanks for coming to the TED Talk, everybody.
And I was searching online and I found your YouTube channel and I clicked and I watched and I was looking at it for a bit. But then I clicked into your channel and I realized there were just hundreds and no. It was in the description of your video. You had a spreadsheet with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of beacon jobs that you had done, how they had been completed. Was it a success? All the details, and it was blown away. So I'm really glad to finally get you on the podcast so we can just talk about the ins and outs of medical gameplay, of medical beacons, where they could go, and your reaction to the stuff that CIG has announced recently. So thank you for joining me, man.
And thanks for having me.
If you are all seeing this, then I am away with the family. This was recorded on September 8th. So the information here might be a little outdated. Bear with it. If it is, just leave a little angry comment down below telling us how wrong we are. If it's not, then things are going well. AAK, let's get started off, man. I've already given a whole introduction of you, but can you explain and tell people kind of what it is that what you do in Star Citizen and why this is such a passion of yours?
I got started 7 years ago and quickly left the game because it was a steaming pile of crap. But I don't know when I came back, probably a year later, and just started doing stuff around the verse. More stuff worked, and I'm mostly a ground combat person. I suck at flying. I crash into the ground a lot and other things, but
I get that.
Someone had gifted me 2 million credits, and I got the Cuddy Red after I did a few rescue beacons. And I was like, this is cool. I can help other players in the verse. And back then in, what was that, 315, 316, 317, that was the renaissance for beacons, because we had so many bugs back then. People complain about how unstable and buggy the game is now and how you're constantly dying. It was a lot worse. Yeah, it could be better now too, but
so much worse.
It was really bad. You couldn't go 10 minutes sometimes without someone putting out either a medical rescue beacon because they were incapacitated, or a personal transport beacon because they needed a ride, or a medical assistance beacon because they needed to top off nutrition, or their ship had floated away and they needed someone to push it back down to the ground. So back then, business was booming. You would go from beacon to beacon to beacon, and it was awesome. So I encountered a lot of people on Spectrum who said, oh, I would never do that. I get killed when I use a beacon, or the guy takes forever, or whatever the case may be. And okay, I wonder how many times have I been targeted? And at that point, it had been 0. So how long does it take me to get to someone on average? And that's when a friend of mine was like, oh, well, you could put this in a spreadsheet and it'll calculate whatever. I said, oh, cool. Can you make the spreadsheet for me? Because I'm an idiot.
Famous words right there. Put it in the spreadsheet, man.
I started doing that around 318.2. I wish I had started in 315 because I've done thousands of these. And, it's just one person's data collection, one individual in a sea of millions of players. But it's a rewarding bit of gameplay, and I've stuck with it the entire time. It's basic, it's simple, but I wanted to show people that it doesn't take that long for people to show up on average, that we're not getting shot at when we show up to beacons. And I've just done so many of them, and I figured recording them would and putting the videos on YouTube would show people that this is a viable game loop, and that a lot of this stuff on Spectrum and Reddit is just blown out of proportion. It does happen, but it's just a cosmic rarity most of the time.
I love that you have the receipts too. I think I posted this actually. I wouldn't be able to find it right now. I posted this in the supporters chat on Discord though, like a few weeks ago when I was going through Reddit looking for some. I was just kind of, I think, reading comments, and people were talking about medical gameplay, and somebody said something, and you showed up and you responded about something about rescue, and the person was like, I don't believe you've ever done any of these. And you posted the whole spreadsheet with just like row upon row upon row of listed job. And that's valuable, dude. Like that's the kind of thing that the community needs, because like you said, people need to see it, but I honestly don't know. You say you're one person in millions, sorry, but you might get more data than millions of people would on something that CIG might not really know much about. What are some of the things that you've learned after getting all this stuff tabulated and seeing the trends in like the time that it takes you to go and rescue people versus like how often you get attacked and stuff like that?
Well, I used to keep track of the number of beacons I did on a piece of notebook paper, so I would just make hash marks. So I'm somewhere around the 3,000 mark at this point. And the two main things I've noticed is that people want to use these things, and you're probably going to be safe while responding to them. In the multitude of beacons that I've done, I've been attacked 6, 7, maybe 8 times at most. It's just not a common occurrence, and people say I'm lucky, but look, I'm no stats or math guy. I don't know probability and all this, but I feel like I should be getting attacked a lot more based on how people say this occurs all the time. And even though I do it from time to time, it isn't my place to tell people what they are experiencing during their gameplay session. But at the same time, you're trying to defend gameplay in a game loop that CIG hasn't really been doing anything with. They haven't been supporting it. They don't explain it to anybody in a new player experience. They've removed beacons. They've one thing after the other, and then on top of that, you have content creators who say, hey, don't use them, or Spectrum posts, Reddit posts, and it's been tough. But ultimately, you're going to have a fine time using beacons. My buddy told me, hey, you only have one side of the data. I said, okay, that's a good point. So I did a 120 consecutive death run on different server regions at different times of the day, and I went to a bunker, got killed on purpose, and sent out a beacon. And I only had about 4 people who took above 10 minutes. One of them was a streamer who was shooting a music video outside the bunker on his stream. Yeah. Tom, if you ever see this, 20 minutes,
It
man.
was Tom Beckhauser?
I'm just laying there, yeah. And I saw him at CitizenCon last year, and I was going to go up to him and be like, you son of... But, yeah.
That's so
But
funny.
most of the
Like,
time,
just the fact that he was shooting a music video.
I'm like dancing out there and music in the stream, and I was like, this is ridiculous. But I hear, for as much as I've seen that's positive on both sides of the coin, the biggest, most valid issue for this type of gameplay in any beacons, whether it's rescue beacons, if they bring back transport, if we have fuel and towing finally, is that other players have to wait for you or another person in real time. And that is a valid complaint. Like CIG, and I don't envy this, has to figure out how to balance having a basic form of the gameplay I'm doing with respecting the time of the person on the other end, because their time is just as valid as mine. And while I've never met someone who was mad about using a beacon, ever, that's not an exaggeration. No one's ever been like, hey, this sucked, I should have backspaced. There's still people who won't engage with that because they've had poor experiences, or they see other people's poor experiences and they don't want to have a repeat for themselves.
Mm-hmm. I think we're going to get to the new updates today during this talk, and we're going to talk about kind of the things that CIG might be able to do to make the gameplay work better for people, because I think there are some fairly obvious, maybe not the most easy, but I think there are some obvious ways they could make it work with the current model. Um, you say that most people are, or you say that most of the times you've been saved have been less than 10 minutes. Why do you think that is? Because a lot of times people will get like just some newcomer accepting the rescue beacon from across the star system, not even realizing they have to go and do something.
So that's a systemic issue with the game itself. So back before the big UI change where everything turned like blue and more holography, what is that, like 3.23 maybe, somewhere around there?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, there used to be top screen notifications for all sorts of things. I mean, it was ridiculous. There's just too many. I mean, if you left your ship, you got told you left your ship. If you changed pants, there was a notification for it. I mean, it was just ridiculous. But buried in all of that, there were important notifications, such as, someone sending out a rescue beacon, personal transport beacon, whatever, and you would be able to accept with left or right brackets, in the traditional way that is no longer happening, obviously, because beacons are gone. But um, they would players would accidentally accept a beacon many times and not even know that they had it. They hit the wrong bracket key. They thought they were dismissing and they accepted. Well, their current contract, say they're doing a bunker mission, is still the one that's tracked. It doesn't switch to the latest contract that you've accepted.
Mm-hmm.
So this person would be laying wherever or waiting for a ride, and maybe the player who took the beacon accidentally has chat off. So if you're trying to contact this person, you have no option to resend a beacon at the time or now, and you're screwed. You're either waiting for them until the cows come home, or you're backspacing and going back to a station. And then you have people who are just not prepared for it because they don't realize that there is someone waiting in real time. Sure, I mean, if you die or you're waiting for a ride, you can use that time to go let the dogs out, get a cup of coffee, something like that. It's a nice little bit of downtime, or it can be a nice bit of little downtime programmed into the game, right? Kind
Yeah,
of like
that's fair.
Quantum,
Yeah.
But most people probably want to know the other person is on their way right away, and that's something that some players aren't good about. Either they have a slow ship, or at the time slow quantum drives, or they, well, man, I need to get all this medical stuff now, so let me go land at a station and put these special pants on, and now I have all my pens, and oh man, look in the mirror, boy, I look good. And then they set out and it's been 25 minutes and they haven't even left the station. So
Just doing some
that's
fashion
a
citizen in the
exactly,
meantime.
you're like, man, I need to look good when I show up as the hero. That can't be a thing, right? You have to respect the other player's time, because otherwise you're going to lose the gameplay, especially now, to respawn. So that's one of the big things that delays players responding out, is either they didn't know at the time that they had the beacon, or they just aren't in the mindset to run these as a primary game loop. So for me, it's bunkers and beacons, or DCs and beacons, or Hathor and beacons. I'll drop whatever I'm doing at the moment. I will run right back to my ship, and I'll fly as fast as I can to wherever you're going. The other thing that plagues Star Citizen, and is still an issue, is quantum jumping, routing, using the star map. That costs minutes for trying to get to a player who is waiting for you. Which is another reason why I started making these videos, to show the entire process from, beacon receipt to mission complete.
Right.
You have to see that these are the problems. I flew into the sun 3 times. I'm trying to get to you, but it's also important. You have to communicate to people in chat. Hey, I'm trying my best. But now, obviously, there are other options, so it's not so much of a big deal anymore.
Yeah, you make a good point there that this it's the same it's a kind of similar story to what people perceive as exploration. It's like a profession that's built of a lot of different things you have to do to make it work. And the way quantum travel work is not the first thing that comes up when people are like, why aren't people medics? Oh, because quantum travel. But that, I can see how that would be a really big frustration, because more than anybody else, you have to make random paths that you're not used to making.
Mm-hmm.
And that can really switch up the way that you're your trip is playing out. Would you say that the wait that people have to make is the most difficult or the biggest problem with the current way that medical gameplay works?
So doing this as a primary game loop and being very interested in it, and Star Citizen being what it is in this style of development or whatever, open or quasi open, and having maybe a chance to influence the game and ultimately what comes out of it, I am all about talking to people who had a bad experience. I want to know what went wrong. Oh, you waited. Okay. Did you talk in chat? Did they talk in chat? You know, oh, they never showed up. Oh, they showed up and they shot me in the face. Okay. You know, I want to know all of that stuff. And the biggest thing I found is that people had one poor experience, two poor experiences, and that's it. They're done. They never touch the mechanic again. Or they heard their friend had a bad experience. Well, that's it. All beacons are traps. All beacons take 20 minutes. But if you get past that, the most common issue, the primary issue, in my opinion, is the wait time. It is the fact that there's no way to, and this sounds harsh, maybe, there's no way to gatekeep players who aren't dedicated to giving the best possible performance, you know, out of this whole thing, you know, because that's what it is. You have to get to that player regardless of what they're asking for. And there's a player I go back and forth with on Spectrum, and I messaged him earlier. I said, hey, can I say your name? But the Great Dane, every thread I'm in, he's in as the counterpoint. I'm not waiting more than 5 minutes or 8 minutes or whatever, you know, and that's fine. Hey, we're going to be at odds forever. You know, I don't know what the middle ground is in a lot of cases for that, because everybody's going to have their tolerance for waiting. And I think it's important for people who want to do medical gameplay, at least if beacons turn back on and are functional again, that we really silo into that and focus on doing it. If you're going to accept the beacon, it's going to be because you're already in your ship, you're close to your ship, you have all your stuff. If you're coming out of the deepest level of the Onyx facility, you better type in chat and say, hey, it's going to be a minute or two before I get to my ship. If the person says, hey, no problem, which most of the time, again, people who are using beacons are perfectly okay with that, or not, then, you know, at least you communicate, at least you said, hey. Now, this kind of goes into what they could change to make things better for both sides of the equation. But I mean, that's a long list of changes.
Right. Would you say that the way that the state of medical gameplay right now is just broken?
Yeah, it is. It is absolutely broken. I mean, medical gameplay in Star Citizen was beacons.
Right.
That's really it. The differentiation between what you can do in Star Citizen versus what you can do in Battlefield is that you can go down as a solo player or a pair of players or whatever. You know, you're in your mining truck and it blows up because you click too long or whatever. I don't really know how mining works, and now two of you are dead. Back then, you didn't respawn because you didn't want to lose all your stuff. You didn't want to lose all your progress, have to claim your ship, etc. You call for someone to come out and help you out. Hey, can you revive us? We're out here. We've been here for 3 hours. We got all this, you know, rock stuff. And you would go out there and get them. Well, if the beacons don't work and you can just respawn, the system of medical is broken. I mean, because sure, you have your med gun and you have your med pens, and if you're, you know, the other type of medical is you're embedded with a group. Say you're going to Hathor or Lazarus, and you're the guy who, you know, likes the medical aspect of it. You're the one they call in the group, hey, I'm injured, can you come over here and heal me? Everybody has their role, kind of a squad play situation, you know, and that's it. That's the extent of medical. Hey, I'm the guy, I'll revive somebody in the group if they go down. Okay, cool. He knows his role. Other than that, it's response. It's response to solo players or pairs or whoever calling from, you know, another moon or wherever that you're not at and saying, hey, can you come help me out? I've fallen and I can't get up. Without beacons, that's it. It's if beacons are broken, medical is broken. Now, complexity is a whole nother depth and
Yeah.
breadth. That's a whole nother topic.
Yeah, and we'll get into that because I think a lot of people are also wondering, hey, we've got drugs, we've got injuries, we've even got beacons they're talking about, but where's like surgery and more interesting interactive medical gameplay? So we'll definitely get to that. But it does sound like a lot of what makes Star Citizen's medical situation unique is the beacons. And one thing you mentioned there was like many people don't realize when they take one of those beacons, there's a real person sitting on the other side. They might think this is some kind of NPC mission. This isn't really the kind of thing you see in every game. And you also said that maybe you didn't say it, but it kind of implied that like there needs to be some level of gatekeeping to make sure that high quality medics are getting jobs. Obviously, reputation is an option there, but have you ever considered the possibility of like clocking in and out of being a medic? Like you tick this little setting on your Mobi glass, and then that means that you can get medical beacons. So like it's
That's interesting.
more of like a dedicated job that you're indicating to people you're available for.
Somebody just brought this up the other day. Actually, when you messaged me about this podcast, and I scrambled into my voice chat in my server, and I'm like, I don't know anything about medical. What do I tell them? You know, one of the things, I think it was Lorville Larry actually, he came up with clocking in and out. Yeah, just as you said, you're going on duty or off duty, and I thought that was an interesting thing, kind of like the guide system has a slider. You're available or not, but it has to be more than that, right? Careers, not to get too realistic. I know the original vision, a lot of this was simulation based and all that, and I know it's kind of moved away from that, but realistically speaking, we'll use salvaging for example. You're not just, as a random person off the street, you're not going to go punch the time clock and say, yeah, I got these demolition charges, I'll find which columns we need to attach these to get this structure to fall down and collapse in a specified fashion. No, you need to go through some sort of training and start small and have some sort of qualifying elements. And we kind of have something like that in Star Citizen right now with you go to do a bunker mission or a bounty or something, and you have to do that quote unquote assessment mission first. And honestly, it's the same thing as every other mission. It seems it's just scaled down difficulty and pay. But I think you have to, since these are special scenarios, again, because the unique part of this is that a player is waiting. Now, I don't know what they would do with refuel or towing beacons because it's the same thing, but at least you're not completely down and out in most cases, if you just run out of gas or something like that. Well, I guess you're still stuck, but to have qualifying missions that players have to do to be able to see player beacons. Now, maybe that could be some NPC stuff, which I think should happen. Now, I think we should be helping NPCs. I don't like the NPCs took our jobs and all that. I very much see it that way, as a slippery slope of, okay, you've now cut the weak link out of this, the player element of doing medical, and it's been relegated to materializing NPC or ship that pops out of nowhere and boom, 2 minutes and you're up back in the game. Like, that adds nothing. That's still just as shallow, and you've just excluded thousands of players who've been waiting for a decent medical system.
Yeah, but that could be a great safety net, right? Like if you're in a place where there aren't that many players and somebody doesn't answer it in a certain amount of time, you spawn an NPC to take care of it.
Yes, but that's the important distinction. The important distinction is the conditions set on that. And I think that conversation has to be had in a specific way, because there's a real danger here, not to dog on CIG here, but there's a real danger that these guys will just be like, you know what? Boop, implement NPC revival. You go down, NPC automatically gets dispatched, or you hit a button, and that's it. And then in 2 or 3 years, they'll go back, and for tier 1 or tier 0.5, they'll iterate on that and maybe loosen or tighten the restrictions on that and give some back to the players. Like, I want them to figure out what they want to do now with that, have a concrete design plan and then implement it, in a more uh, in a way with more depth than for them to just knee jerk reaction. NPCs are now medical, and that's what I fear would happen even if we just talk about it. But yeah, that is a great safety net, and it's probably something that should exist. And I mean, even options is being able to resend a beacon if a player hasn't moved in not even a time limit. If you don't like the person's name, XX 360 no scope XX has taken your beacon. No, I'm not supporting 360 no scoping.
Oh my
And
gosh,
you
my
just
Modern
judge a book
Warfare
by a
2
cover.
profile
Yeah,
there.
that's it. You're out. You're not combat sliding around me, and you just resend the beacon to somebody else, and it excludes them from that next round. I think that would be a positive change. Having it go out in like a concentric circle, from the position where you're at, and hit everybody closest, to you first, instead of going to the other side of the system at the
Yeah,
same exact time. I mean,
yeah.
I used to compete with other people with getting those beacons. I'd hover over that left bracket, and you had the fastest hands of the West, because people were, when they were plentiful, people fought over them. People want to do this gameplay. They want to be, the rescuer, the wannabe space hero. They want to rush out of whatever they're doing with their wee woo lights and go brave all hell to go get you back up. Like, it's fun,
Yeah, I
and
think
you want to see how fast you can do it. You want to succeed at that. But yeah, there does have to be, safety nets, and there does have to be measures to where that experience is improved for the person who's actually using the beacon.
you make a really good point there. There are a lot more people who want to do this than people give credit for. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy though, in that CIG hasn't really supported it that well, and so people don't want to use it, and therefore they think, and people in general think, it's not a popular choice. But it's it's cool. Like it's kind of like oh man, it's like any other type of gameplay, really. It's like you have a type of gameplay you like, and that gameplay takes you into all these different scenarios, and that's what's fun about it. Sometimes you're saving people in Onyx, sometimes in Hathor, sometimes floating out in some derelict spaceship. And I think a lot of people are into that. It's just the infrastructure surrounding it. The fact that we don't have reputation is like awful.
That's the other thing. The system they showed last year, had Sitcon, and it took everything. I probably almost elbowed PK in the face. I wanted to jump up and yell beacons when that came on the screen, but I figured maybe I keep calm. But that's exactly what they do need. They need something that has reputation for a lot of things, right? The leaderboard's a good idea. Having, the option to see the last few rescues. I mean, obviously that can be cheesed. This German med runner guy, I forgot his name, but we're having a drink, and he's like, you can just shoot your friend and revive them, and he gives you a good rating. Shoot your friend and revive them, and he gives you a good rating. There's always going to be a way to exploit these things, but at the very least, the predominant bulk of the player base will be able to gauge whether or not, this person that's coming for you gets there in a good amount of time. I mean, they could even have response statistics. I mean, there's a lot they can do, and I don't know what goes into all that, especially getting it to work consistently. Star Citizen is, but that is something that is necessary, for this gameplay to survive. For a gameplay where you have to interact with another person, you have to rely on someone to come get you. There needs to be a trust factor, not only in them not blowing your head off, but also in them not making you wait in a ridiculous amount of time.
Yeah, that weight is really important. Just something that you mentioned earlier, just like you spawn the beacon, somebody takes it, and then you're looking at the distance that it tells you that person is away, and it's like the number's not moving. Like, okay, is it glitched, or is that person standing still? Are they away from their computer, or are they setting their quantum route to me? Like, it's so hard to know if the person who
Yeah.
took the job is actually seriously coming to get you, or if they're just kind of like scooting about, going about their daily missions. There was one time when I sat there for like 3 minutes watching this number go up and down, and I realized this person is just traveling around in the system that they're in. They're not actually coming to get me. So yeah, sending out the beacon again would be nice. Um, you'd mentioned Battlefield earlier. That kind of has an interesting system where you just are sitting there and it tells you the distance that multiple medics are from you, and any of them can come and help you. Do you think that kind of open format would be bad for Star Citizen?
No, no, I think having, and this kind of goes back to, what you and my buddy suggested about having like an on duty slider, you know, which, maybe you have to maintain a certain reputation, maybe you have to do a certain number of rescues, whatever, to unlock. And this is where the progression element kind of comes into medical gameplay, because in a way there really is no progression. You take the beacons as they come. It's an organic, emergent gameplay element that CIG can't craft, and a lot of other parts of the game don't offer. So you never really know what you're getting. So having something like that to increase player agency and options for choosing a rescuer would be good. Maybe they get a kind of a star map. I mean, if you're going to have this whole website that pops up now, with all these options, most of them are focused on respawn, which is a mistake in my opinion. But why not have a star map or a local map of your planet or moon? Hey, this person is this close. Here's their rating. Kind of like when you go on Google Maps and you're looking for hotels or restaurants. Why not have that? And then why not be able to track that person's movement on the map? Like a shared location all the way to you. Give you something to look at instead of, just laying there looking at that nauseating flashing gray screen. But yeah, I think that would be a good idea. And I've never heard that idea either, to see who's local to you and be able to have a choice.
Yeah,
Right.
that would be nice. I didn't even think about the keeping them on the map to show them as well, but that'd be great. Also, maybe like auto creating a party, or like some way
Yes.
that you could easily communicate back and forth.
Yes. Because
Hey, I'm here, right?
with the friends list problem and with the bigger servers, when that happened where you couldn't scroll it, I haven't been able to see the friends list since 4.0 PTU. It's invisible to me. There's nothing there. So for me to now, I have to alt tab out, send a friend request on Spectrum, hope they see it, then go back in, try to
Oh
send a
God.
party inviter, and it's just a pain in the ass. And to create a party automatically would be great, because you have to encounter ship doors and stuff like that. Alternatively, it would be cool if things like the Oxy Torch or other tools could be used by a rescuer to part of your gameplay is to cut the door off, you know, and gain entry that way, or
Yeah.
something like that. But I think definitely for starters, a party should be created. And then maybe even auto turns on chat on the screen, just your
Hmm.
party chat,
Yeah.
because communication is important, and anybody responding to a beacon or a player's request for help in chat should be communicating every step of the way to the person who's waiting on you.
Yeah. Honestly, it sounds like most, besides I mean, even reputation is a thing in game already. It sounds like most of the things that could be done to fix medical beacons themselves are already things that are in game. It's just that CIG hasn't really put effort into them. It seems like there are a certain amount of things they could do with the existing systems to make this a really viable part of the game already.
After reading those new briefs, which I think was a great move on their part, we don't typically get communication like that,
No, we don't.
consolidated in one area on one topic. And a lot of the people, on Spectrum and in the community, cling to these old legacy documents. This is the plan. This is
That's
how
me.
it's going to work. And they conveniently forget that things have changed so much on so many things, which is fine. It's just the way it is. That's the nature of this beast, right? Whether we like it or not. And there's a lot of things I don't like, obviously. But I think them acknowledging that beacons are broken because something tech, something spaghetti code, something legacy. I mean, I don't pretend to even begin to guess what they have to go through to get whatever to work, right? And what else it affects. They turn a screw over here, and a mile down the road, a piece of a building falls off. I don't know anything about programming or game development. I'm sure it's not that easy of a process, right? Even in the modern day.
Hmm.
So acknowledging that they haven't given this the time of day, and that it's probably going to be a while because they have to do so much heavy lifting to get it to work and interface with other systems. Hey, thanks. That's all that's really needed every once in a while is just check in, and say, hey, your stuff's going to be a while. Go find something else to do. That's a nice touch. I don't know what it would take to put in the things we just discussed, or really anything else. So who knows when that could be? And then medical beacons. That's just one beacon for one situation. Showing off the other beacons, towing, refueling, transportation. Whatever was in those slides in the social part of the sitcom presentation. I don't know what it would take to put all that in and get it all to work together and then consistently. So I guess we'll have to see.
Yeah, I'm guessing that the other beacons are on a system that it's probably kind of like the transit stuff they're doing where they're trying to do some transit work to fix what we have right now while they build a completely separate system that's going to take over. I'm guessing the medical beacons would just be them fixing whatever is there rather than introducing whatever their new version of beacons is. But the way they've talked about them, at least as of right now, as of September 8th, 2025, does sound like they're not really expecting them to be fixed for 4.3.1, possibly, but it sounds like it's on the lighter side of possible. How do you feel about that?
Like shit. Sorry. Like crap.
Oh, you already said it.
I mean, yeah, I don't know if you could go back and bleep that, but that was the thing that I did, and that's the thing that thousands of other gamers did, hundreds of orgs, all focused around this type of activity. And I feel like the people who do this sort of gameplay, are generally underrepresented. But I mean, that could be the same for salvage or other types of gameplay, data running, exploration. Oh, those guys.
Data runners unite, man.
Yeah. But it's tough because the longer we go without what may or may not be a foundational element of Star Citizen, because that's important. That's something that needs to happen also. These design briefs were great, but CIG needs to come out and say X, Y, and Z are going to be in this game come hell or high water. These are non-negotiable mechanics, non-negotiable gameplay loops. It's going to be a while or whatever, but this is what's going to happen.
You know what would have been
when they start making
a great place to do that is in like some kind of hypothetical hour-long explanation of like what would Star Citizen 1.0 be. That would be just, man, I hope they do that.
I hope they invite me.
or they could instead talk about player-run space stations for 25 minutes.
Yeah, Star Citizen's an interesting beast with the hopiums and the copiums and the future. And like that's one of the great things about Star Citizen is some of the game is in your imagination, and it's for that reason that CIG needs to take a hard stance on some things, because right now beacons have been down for so long or non-functioning for so long, even if they were still in the game, that there are no players utilizing them. There's no players having an option to call for help. Ever since 3.21 ? When they introduced tier 3 bed respawn, or medical bed respawn in general. 323, excuse me. Or 3.21, maybe the C8R came out. They set this precedent. Hey, don't worry about a thing. Just respawn, just backspace to your medical ship. And they have taken the word medical and they have put it in the same sentence as respawn. Like this is the same thing, and it's not. Respawning is you've committed suicide or otherwise died really hard, and now you can come back in ambulance. That's not good. That's, the 3 blockers for medical are respawn, tier 0 item retention, and the fact that you can still backspace anywhere, without penalty. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing that they've added or going to add the ability to choose a respawn location, have multiple imprints. I think these are also important quality of life things that they have to do. But they have to do so in a way that respawn isn't always the better option. And right now, it's still the better option. It's the best option because there's no other way in the game for people to have a choice to say, hey, I want to engage, the medic. Someone, let me send out my beacon. I need a ride, or I need this injury healed so I can stay in place and continue doing what I'm doing. The only option is respawn. And even with the introduction of, the goop, which I honestly think it should either be more expensive or they should remove tier 3 respawn altogether. And then obviously for healing, that's kind of punishing to, the medical player. A lot of players, and I can't speak for everybody, but we do this because we enjoy the gameplay, which is the reward, and we want to help other players, which is the reward. So I refund everybody's beacon, whatever, when it was a thing, like I would just send them their money back. But now that it costs me 50,000 goop credits or whatever to heal a broken arm or what have you, I mean, I'm still going to refund it. I'll just run a couple bunkers. I'll be back on top. Like it's so easy to make money in Star Citizen that money is not a problem, So it won't be a problem for people to hoard, respawn goop, and it won't be a problem for people to run a medical ship. That's not a detractor. If it is, then I mean, that's just up to your style of gameplay, I guess.
So I have a lot of questions about all of that. First, I guess I would like to hear from you is, well, it sounds like, in your opinion, respawning is just still too easy.
Yes, it is. That is all.
Do you think that well, let's talk about the changes that have come. So basically they're introducing med goop, goopy goops, whatever you want to call it, to everything else outside of the medical tool, which is kind of where we already use this substance. They've added both measurements to the medical goop that determine whether or not you can heal or respawn in a bed, and they've also added like the fact that this goop can be inserted into beds. So all medical beds accept a resource that you need to keep stocked in order to be healed or respawned on a bed that is not in a hospital. How do you feel about that system itself?
I think we knew it was coming, like we discussed before. I didn't actually think it was going to affect healing, because again, medical's already on the downfall, the downslope of its previous success and activity. Don't add insult to injury. But I think respawn is a shallow element. I think just being able to run into a place, a hostile situation, unprepared, or and I solo a lot of things, and I'm not very good at games, but I survive 90% of the time. I think it takes away from other things that should be in the game. So preparation, possibly teaming up, joining an org, grouping up with randos, which, contrary to popular belief, is actually safe most of the time. Just giving people, kind of like the Nursa commercial, except now it just costs money. There's just no stakes, and of course you still get to keep your stuff. Okay, well, we're not going to let you keep your stuff for free. Okay, well, that costs money. Yeah, the game probably needs money sinks, and I don't pretend to know how to figure out the economy and how money should work and the expensive things in the game, but if you want to have medical gameplay, you have to give players a real reason to engage with it. Now, whatever medical gameplay turns out to be, you have to give players a reason to engage with it. And if respawn is still the least expensive or best value option, and you get to keep your stuff, and who knows when that'll go away, then you're going to continue setting a precedent that leads players away from engaging with anything else but Respawn. Oh, I have a broken arm? Okay, backspace, boop. I'm back in my Pisces or my Nursa. I'm on my way, no injury.
Yeah.
You know,
You're kind of changing the way that people think about the game.
Right. And people are going to grow accustomed to this. So when it does come time to change it, if they change it, it's going to be a lot of backlash. And a lot of developers don't handle that well. Sometimes backlash is very much warranted, and sometimes it's you still have to value the integrity of the vision of your game. What did you want to do with this game? Not like every other game. What did you want to do with your game? Okay, the players don't like it. They're not going anywhere. They're not going to refund because you guys didn't let people respawn in tier 3 beds anymore. They're going to complain on Spectrum for 2 weeks. And as long as you have the other option, beacons working, and people just taking things maybe a little bit more slower, people will adjust to the different types of gameplay and style that they have to do now to avoid dying as much, just like we adjusted to master modes and adjusted to everything else. So I think this is a step. The introduction of the goop is a step in the right direction, but at the same time, on the healing aspect, it's a lateral step in the wrong direction. So the first path was going in the right direction. Now we have a new path and we're going backward. You can't punish the medical community, in such a significant way. Does it cost money to operate equipment? Sure. Does it require resources? Yeah, that makes sense. But having it be so steep, and I don't agree with raising the cost of beacons either, because you shouldn't punish the player who you're desperate for them to engage with this after you've treated them to respawn for so long. They're not going to spend 50K or 100K for you to come out. They're just going to eat that cost and continue on with their life. And that's
should
it.
be based on the EVR like they do the rest of the contracts anyways.
I don't know. How does that work?
So, like, if you're getting a rescue from outside of a safe outpost on Daymar, the beacon would cost less than if you were getting a rescue on the sub-level 9 of an Onyx facility.
Oh, that's an interesting idea. I suppose that would have to be paired not only with the threat to the rescuer, but also the value of that player being able to stay right there.
Yeah.
Provided that you're not just putting respawn points at all the event locations.
That does sound like where they're headed. Be honest,
Yeah,
the way that they talked about defining different beds and how they work, it sounds like they just want there to be beds everywhere, and then they're going to limit how they work.
And I don't. Again, like that's it. There's only so much you can do with medical, right? You have your combat medic, quote unquote, the player that is with you in your group, whether an org, friends, or randoms, and you're doing a thing, and that's the person carrying, 80 goops, and 50 med pens and whatever, and they're the one who's going to run to you and revive you, right? Then you have your kind of like 911 response gameplay, which is beacons. Hey, I've fallen and I can't get up. Hey, I'm coming. And you speed out there and you save them. The third thing is something that I don't actually think will ever come to pass, which is things with, what's that ship with like the geodesic domes on it?
Endeavor.
It's supposed to be like a hospital ship there. I don't know where doctor gameplay is going to go, like definitive care, as it's called in the industry.
Yeah.
I don't know what's going to happen with that, but in the immediate and short term, your two types of medical are
that's a
medic,
post 1.0 kind of thing at this point.
So, I mean, they have to make these decisions now on whether they want to throw medical out the window, and
right.
It's just one of those things. Respawn can't coexist with medical, in a meaningful way. It's difficult.
Setting aside, I think one of the things that makes that really difficult too is that people don't know just how much of this game is going to be predicated on being downed but not being killed. Like CIG's made it very clear they don't want people to die very often. They want you generally to go down and then for some way that to lead to you getting back up. That being said though, wanting to put respawn locations in more places does tread on that a little bit. So it's that same old confusing mixed messages from CIG, but putting aside the respawning and talking just about medical, which is what you are leaning more towards, it's mainly based around drugs, injuries, and the afflictions that come from those things. Uh, when you get to a rescue place, are you actually ever needing to use a medical bed and use that goop to heal injuries, or are you just going in with a medical tool and taking care of getting them up and then that's it?
So it depends. The situation always dictates. You know, it used to be, talking about when beacons came in around 315 time frame, tier 3 was what you got most of the time. That's what you'd find out in the field. Whether they were dead or alive, the tier 3 injury is what you saw. And then later in the 3.2 somewhere range, they changed something to where you actually racked up a tier 3 and a tier 2 injury, which gave validity to the medical terrapin coming in. It had less options in one area, but greater options in another area, and you had to kind of pick and choose what ship you wanted to fly that day in case you encounter something like this. But I think the injury system is going in the right direction with that. You have needed a medical bed in the past. I've had players who, for reasons I don't know if they were intended or if it was just one of those happy accidents that Star Citizen provides, no matter how many times I revive them, they would just die again on the spot. So there's been several cases where I've had to do the full game loop itself, which doesn't really occur that often. So someone's put out a beacon, help, I've fallen and I can't get up. I respond out as quickly as possible, shoot them with the goop, they're up, and then they're down again. Shoot them with the goop, they're up, and they're down again. And I'm like, well, I don't know what to do. This is beyond me. So I tractor beam them or drag them over to the medical bed of the Cuddy Red or Terrapin and place them in the bed. Now I'm flying back to a station as quickly as possible to then take them into the emergency elevator inside the hangar. That is the full medical gameplay loop. I showed up, I stabilized them, they needed definitive care, we left. And they respawn in the clinic, and if they need a ride back, I give them a ride back or whatever the case may be. So there are plenty of times where players just have regular injuries that need to be healed, and you'll see that at your Lazarus sites and your Hathor sites, or if someone falls down a mountain, you'll have tiered injuries that do require the med bed.
Okay.
So it is going to see some action.
Okay. So then in that case, a lot of, but the medical beacon itself doesn't actually, it gets completed as soon as they get back up, right? So you get paid once they are revived. It's not necessarily they have to say, okay, I'm good to go. Here's the payment.
Right. They addressed that a while ago where it wasn't auto paying. But and for a time it did work. I mean, obviously it's been a while.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, once you revive them, that only works for rescue beacons. So if you're incapacitated and you send out a beacon and someone revives you, they automatically get paid the 15K or whatever they're charging now, 50K. Yeah. With the other ones, medical assistance, you would have to manually get paid.
I see. Okay, so rescue beacon works one way, medical assistance another. Because I'm thinking the price to complete a beacon, the cost that you get, what you get is 15K credits. If you wanted to go and heal that person's injuries in your bed, you're essentially using 50,000 credits. But that's not necessarily required for the rescue beacon.
No, not all. No, actually, I mean, if you don't want to heal them at all, you don't have to. If you're just reviving them with the med gun, then you just do that.
Man, so the beacon needs. I mean, it needs to get better at requiring that kind of. I guess you don't need to. You could just have a reputation system, and then people will eventually find out that somebody doesn't. They just gave me a Band-Aid, then left.
I mean, I feel like that's not going to be too much of an issue with at least the people that I've interacted with who do the medical gameplay. They're going to want to see the mission completely through, and they'll accept the costs. People who do this regularly that I know at least will just eat the cost and call it a day. But the unspoken thing about medical rescue is that the tips are often enormous. I've made millions from single rescues before, and I'm not saying it's a constant thing, but people will always send you a little extra money. So
Do you
it's
think
not
it's
like we're going to be
AUEC,
broke.
or do you think people would still do that after the live game?
I think people. Well, I don't know how the future currency is going to work different than the AUEC.
Well, just because like people still see the game right now as it's going to wipe at some point. Money's not important. Do you think that they're just more willing to drop an extra tip for you on here? Or do you think the kindness of humans will just find its way into the?
I think it's going to be a combination of factors. I think the people who engage with medical, at least from what I've experienced, they want to do a kindness, right? And the other thing is, and this leads back into whether this is a true restriction on respawn or not, is that you make so much money so quickly, whether actually playing the game or just begging in chat. It's amazing that anybody's like, this is an outrageous cost. Come on, really? You could do 2 bunkers and earn yourself another respawn. That's what, 7 minutes of gameplay. Like, don't complain.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not that hard to make money in this game. Well, I say that, and I just never make a ton of money, but I think if you really want to make money, you can make some good money. So I want to talk a little bit about the more distant future. Like we're not getting super deep into the current changes because we just did that in the last episode. I wanted to get more of like your perspective on how all this stuff is being presented, and that multiple respawn thing is, I think, the biggest revelation of all of this new information we're getting on medical gameplay. It's a big change. Having a respawn screen in Star Citizen, it's going to have a whole selection of like where you can respawn, where you last went, all that kind of stuff. Does that affect your outlook on, I want to say medical gameplay, but this is obviously more, it's rescue and medical, respawn, all that kind of stuff. Does it have a big effect on the future?
Well, first of all, I still think respawn should be considered a whole separate thing. Even in some case, maybe have a separate goop. But I think giving people more options, if they're not taking respawn away, and it definitely doesn't look like they're taking respawn away, then you might as well improve the mechanic anyway. And I think having, especially with the introduction of, now we have 2 systems and maybe a third on the way, in a year or two. I think this is a necessary thing, just as a quality of life adjustment to make it easier for people to group up and do stuff, or just to get around if you don't want to claim a ship or something like that. I think this is important, but I still think as long as it's more accessible and has a more valuable outcome, you're always going to choose respawn over medical. So while I don't think they shouldn't be doing these quality of life adjustments for that, I think, again, if they want, medical shouldn't be this niche thing that you just do with 3 or 4 friends who are dressed as nurses at home. This has been part of the game for a long time.
Yeah.
This has been an accepted thing and a thing that people use on both ends. It shouldn't just be pushed off to the side in favor of a shallow mechanic of just, backspacing or whatever. But yeah, anything that supports respawn is gonna not support medical, but I still think those adjustments are the right thing to do.
I think maybe they could just continue to play around with the resources that it takes for respawn. We still don't really know what they're going to do. We don't know all the consequences they have planned for death at respawn. And I think it's interesting they're not talking about that yet. Like they very, very much did not want to get anyway into the whole DNA regeneration, echoes of injuries kind of discussion during this announcement.
I mean, I wouldn't. I mean, again, they have to decide on foundational elements that are go or no go in the game. Simple as that. I mean, they have to come out and say, hey, this will be here and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
This will be like this and that's it, and everything else around it will be iterated. And that's it's hard to A, figure those things out probably, and B, come out to the community and say, hey, this is the way it's going to be, like it or lump it. But I guess we'll have to wait for the third part of the medical brief.
Whenever that comes. Yeah, I didn't. Did they say there was going to be like some other release?
I mean, I guess eventually they'll that second part about do you want to know more, kind of hinted at there'll be information to come, but I mean they definitely didn't tease any depth or complexity changes to medical in that. They just said this is how things are right now. These are the tools of the trade, and this is how they work, which is fine because that's a necessary thing. Like that needs to come out. People need to be aware that this stuff exists and that there even was medical. That's the first step is awareness of this gameplay. But yeah, they didn't touch on anything that may be coming, which again, the bottom line with complexity and depth of medical, at least the player facing portion, demands that it is balanced with the other players' time, their real time in mind. This can't have the Ace Combat mod from Arma 3 where you're, carefully unfusing the armor from their leg and, wrapping their leg up and starting an IV and titrating the medication to effect to make sure you're not gonna, the other guys gonna be waiting there like, can you hurry up? I got 15 minutes left to play and I need to finish this mission. My wife's yelling at me. Just push all the drugs at once. So we'll see what happens.
Hit the all button. Well, there was a rumor or maybe speculation or maybe CIG said it, I don't know. But back when they talked about bounty hunting and putting the body of the person who's still alive in the back of your ship and taking them back to jail and all that stuff, people were like, I'm not gonna sit in somebody's body pod for an hour while they derp around before going to turn in their job. And one of the possible solutions to that was replacing the player's body with an NPC body and then just auto spawning the player into the jail, or at least giving them the ability to do that, because obviously if you get arrested, there's always some chance a friend could come and bust you out before that person gets you all the way back to jail. So like trade-offs of waiting, right? Or using AI to finish the job. And I do wonder if that's a possibility. I think we talked about that a little before the podcast, of doing that with medical too, where if there are no players there to come and pick you up, they can spawn an NPC in that makes sure that, no player is waiting more than a maximum of X amount of time. But then there's a lot of complications that come from that too.
Yeah, that's not as straightforward. For as much as people say we need respawn because the game is buggy, even though it's you just don't die anymore on a consistent basis from from stairs, chairs, and ramps like you used to. I think response time, is dictated a lot of the time by whether your hangar spit out your ship. How long you had to wait in the queue to get out of the hangar. Did quantum routing work? Did the star map pull up? Were you able to access your inventory, in a decent amount of time? There's bugs on the responders end too that add on to the time. So I think one of the big things that CIG needs to tackle are these consistent legacy bugs. Before making decisions on foundational elements of the game, introducing major things like respawn, you need to first address a lot of what makes players frustrated about the current game, a lot of what causes injuries, causes death, causes delays in response, makes people think no one's coming to their beacon. Well, that's because they have no marker. The contract's there, but it doesn't produce a marker, and you're not using chat because the system is broken. So I think a lot of these bugs need to be addressed first before they come out with these major changes, because ultimately those bugs are still going to be there and they're still going to interact. They just re-added NPC dropships. Do you remember those when they first came out? They'd land.
Oh my God.
And the guys would just sit in a seat and you would just shoot them and be done with your day. And there'd just be a pile of Cuddy Blacks right there.
Yeah.
Or they tumble in weird circles.
Yeah.
All right, go ahead and call your NPC medic. Good luck. I'll be there 4 times over before that thing appears and is able to figure out how to walk straight. So I think a lot has to be done for that system. But if you're going to make NPCs that advanced, then give medical crowd NPC missions. Where's my humanitarian aid? Where's my
hell yeah.
NPC rescue missions? We have weather now, natural disasters. We have swamps, coming. Maelstrom, like collapse a settlement from a tornado. I don't know. Give us something to do besides beacons, but hey, we're already geared up for that gameplay. So if one comes in and we are on duty and we're close by, we'll go get it.
That's what I thought could have been the biggest thing they could do with bringing in the Apollo was like, okay, cool, bring in the Apollo, just give medical missions now of some sort. We already have rescues, just put those NPCs in a down state instead of a dead state. And like the most simple basic thing, well, I say simple and basic, but like as far as medical gameplay goes, it's just going somewhere and pressing a button on somebody and then watching them change.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, it doesn't even look like we're going to get medical beacons. So it's like this was not a prepared launch for the. This is like the Apollo's coming in. Let's make a change. And here's what we can do right now. Throw some resources in there.
I don't even know what they would do, honestly, for the future medical gameplay. I think the Apollo is just a respawn point. I think a lot of people who are getting into it now or since respawn was introduced see it as a mobile respawn point. Medical ships, nobody used to shoot it the Cutlass red because why bother? There's nothing in it, and it doesn't fight too well. But now, ever since medical ships became respawn points, if you land somewhere for too long, you're going to get your ship blown up because nobody wants a laser jet people printer in the operational area that could start spitting out a whole org. So I don't know what the plan was or what people expected with the Apollo as far as medical gameplay goes, because it's still so much to figure out. I mean, even having these bed modules, you don't need more than one bed for medical. Pre-goop or post-goop, it doesn't take that long to heal somebody, even if they have a tier 1 injury or tier 2 or whatever.
The original concept's broken then, huh?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and they knocked out the drones.
Yeah.
Because you don't need to retrieve a patient if they're just going to respawn anyway in the ship or somewhere else, right? So they realize, well, what's the point in working on that tech if people aren't going to actually get rescued by anybody? Which I think that was a very telling thing. And of course, that's my opinion on it, but I feel like that had a lot to do with it. But even the Apollo modules, again, like it takes 2 seconds to get healed, and the next person can lay in the bed. You don't need 6 beds. There's no mass casualty events in the game, and I don't know if there's ever going to be, really.
Polaris crashing. You put that person in the pilot seat, they don't know how to ride it, and you got to have the Apollo nearby to save everybody. User error problems.
That's my problem, is crashing into the ground.
Yeah, I think like this is the problem. This is their big problem, is the ships and concepts that got made before they designed the game, and now that they're designing the game, not only are they not really sticking completely to what they had planned back then, they're changing things based on the player base and how gaming is now. And so those concepts are becoming even more outdated, and they're kind of looking for ways to use them. You mentioned the Endeavor earlier, having a whole hospital on a ship. How are you going to justify that with this sort of medical gameplay? How are you going to justify the Apollo without its drones? How are you going to make it feel like it's worth its time and effort when maybe you don't need 6 beds at once? Yeah, I don't know. It's I like that the medical gameplay is going forward, but it does feel like this is more of a scramble just to like have it updated for the Apollo's release, rather than we've been working through this in the design phase very slowly over the last 7 years since this was concepted, and now here is the grand plan that was made to work with it.
It's very underwhelming, and I don't know if it was a scramble or if this was part of that grand plan. I really don't think it affects the Apollo's launch at all. I think I'm celebrating this whole thing, but it's the smallest of steps. Um,
You've been
it's the smallest of steps in the right direction because it's acknowledging medical, number one, and number two, because it's just in the very slightest restricting one of the blockers to medical gameplay, which is respawn. Now, like I said before, and then they stepped out of that path and they're like, on this new path, we're going to go backward and make healing people very expensive. And I'm sure they'll adjust that. Who knows? It could go up. I don't know what they're thinking, but I think if you look at all of the original design concepts, and I hate to go back to that stuff because I'm not a fan of a lot of those people who quote these plans like they're gospel. Like, look around, things have changed and they're going to continue to change, just as you said. But all of these medical ships and vehicles were billed as response assets. These are coming in to medevac people out, like in real life. You know, you have your helicopters and your aircraft to come in and, or, you know, ground ambulances to pull people out, whether civilian or military. You know, these are designed around that. So when you introduce a concept like respawn, that negates really that whole concept. So I at the end of the day, I mean, these things are just going to stay the same as they've been until there's a reintroduction of the basic medical gameplay we had, which again revolved around beacons. That's the big differentiation between that and every other FPS game, where you can heal someone in person because you're already there with them. You know, like Battlefield or Squad or something. You know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You want it to be more of like you're grouping up and you have some respawn points if you need them. Do you feel like the drugs and injuries, I think I might have asked you this already, but do you feel like the drugs and injuries that we have in the game and the way that they're approaching them, from the radiation damage to the cold to the hot, fall damage, legs, all that kind of stuff, do you think with those aspects of medical, this gameplay can be complex and interesting enough in the future, or do you think there will need to be more things added in?
So this is complicated. Again, moving the disclaimer out of the way of it needs to be more streamlined to respect the player's time, the other player, not the medic. But aside from that, implementing a more complex medical system, not only mini games where you have to line up 2 dots and drop something in a hole, that's not fun. I mean, the actual concept of treating either a player or an NPC, I mean, it starts with the injury system itself. Like, how deep are they going to go with that? How can they make that appear on the screen in a more granular fashion where you have to address smaller things and act on those? What does your diagnostic equipment look like? You know, what does that readout do for you? And then what are you carrying? I mean, right now we have the pens, and the pens are all useless except for the red pen and then you have the med gun. But I don't know how that's going to work, because introducing, all right, maybe you gatekeep the advanced mode of the med gun from new medics, right? They have to do enough missions to unlock advanced mode. Okay, now you have advanced mode, but there's no auto button because you're the guy, you're the paramedic. You know, you're able to adjust blood values or drug values and dosages on your gun, right? What is the criteria for that? I mean, you know, you have medications that are weight based. You have medications that do one thing in one dose, you know, and another thing in another dose, like atropine, for example. If you have bradycardia, slow heart rate, you know, you're going to do, you know, 1 milligram of atropine to the patient to speed their heart up, you know, given they don't have, you know, they meet the criteria and there's not other issues surrounding that. But, you know, but if they have organophosphate poisoning, it's 2 milligrams or 3 milligrams. And then that's repeated, every 20 or 30 minutes. Like, so this is a very deep rabbit hole to go into, because number one, you have to have this underlying foundation, this setup of all these different injuries. I mean, trauma's fairly straightforward, and most of the injuries you encounter are from trauma in Star Citizen. You fell down the hill, you got shot in the face. So what? You show up. Hey, your bone is sticking through your armor. Am I going to see that, or is the med gun going to tell me that, or is my fancy medical helmet, going to tell me, hey, they have a broken leg? Do I have to treat them with a specific medication? Is that what it's going to come to? Keeping the medication basic. It's a purple pen, it's an orange pen, whatever. Or what am I really adjusting on that advanced mode slider on the med gun? Like, how are they going to do that? How are they going to determine? They almost have to make their own, I don't know, medical protocol system that says in order to treat this leg injury, they can only tolerate this percent of hemazole or whatever. I don't know. I mean, that they're going to need an adult to help them out with that. I don't know how they'll do that.
Do you think they would even go that far? I kind of feel like they just want to settle for the purple goo heals vision kind of thing.
I think they'd have to settle on purple goo heals vision. I think they'd have to silo those different medications into a specific injury, and nothing else will work. I think they'd have to, maybe the hemazole pen acts as like a hemostatic agent. It just stops the bleeding, right? It's like increases clotting factor, so you don't die or don't bleed out, but it doesn't increase health. That's kind of a complicated endeavor for them to figure that out. I mean, at the end of the day, is it going to be a beam? Yeah, probably. Is it going to be, a stabby pen? Probably. And I really don't think it should go further than that, because again, if we're going to be interfacing with players, and here's one of those foundational elements that CIG has to decide, are we going to heal players or not? If yes, okay, how much does this new complex medical system affect the player's time?
Yeah.
After the time they waited for someone to come out, are they looking at another minute and a half before this person could get them back in the fight? So it's, they have a lot to consider there, and maybe they shouldn't go that deep just yet. Maybe they should get the other stuff, in play, with players getting used to having other players come and help them. Maybe get some NPC missions out there for the medical crowd, give us something to do, and then maybe introduce this stuff later on down the line when people have accepted that they will be interfacing with other players. Give it to us in small doses. No pun intended.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know, man. It feels like a more in-depth problem than the cargo hauling problem, which is like, you want to make cargo hauling deep for the people who really want it. You want to make sure that it has gameplay that scales and allows for time to be taken, but at the same time, you've got all the people who don't do cargo stuff but might interact with it every once in a while. They may not want all that depth, and they want to very easily be able to get rid of their cargo hauling objectives while they want to do the other gameplay that they're working on. And medical is like a worse version where people have to be involved there. So you want to build this depth in with like different types of drugs and injuries and all that kind of stuff, but at the same time you want to make it so that people aren't really forced to deal with that. And it's hard when it comes to the medical aspect of the game.
I mean, that's the pill that's going to have to be swallowed by everyone, and not just for medical either. And this is where CIG, like I said before, needs to come out and say these are the non-negotiables. These are the tenets of the game, and that's it. This is immutable. These are law.
I don't even know if they have that, man, anymore. I
don't either, and it's tough to make something like that. It's tough to take a stance and dig in, and you obviously it may not work out on a technical aspect. It may not work out on a gameplay aspect, and what if it's not fun? What if it's too easy? A lot of that I'm sure is on the table at all times, interfacing with their decisions. But even for what was I thinking of? You mentioned hauling. Oh, so a long time ago, in the early versions, probably like 5 years ago in 7 Days to Die, you'd be playing with your friends and you'd have to branch off into specialties. In order to get that level 5 shotgun, you needed the guy who did the shotgun tree, right? Who went off in that path and specialized in firearms or whatever, in order to get those advanced. So, this kind of feeds into crafting. As far as progression goes and unlocking different aspects, I mean, I think you should be able to interface with all of the game loops, because you have to see what you're going to like anyway, on a basic level. But to really advance and to get access to missions and equipment, or better equipment. I don't remember what the crafting tier stuff is, but that sort of thing, to make more money on hauling, to haul more interesting things. I don't really know if hauling has interesting things, but you know what I mean? I feel like they're going to have to introduce some sort of tangible progression system in that regard, to let people experience stuff at a basic level, but have it be a far cry from the potential of what it could be. If they were to continue down that path and do those qualifying missions and earn that reputation, and hook up with guilds or whatever.
They had a lot of work to do. But don't worry, dude, it might come out in 27. That's another thing, is like, if like, let's take Chris seriously on his expectations. He thinks Star Citizen 1.0 could hit a release in 27 or 28. Now, I don't think most people believe that it could happen. But I think the more telling part, the communication that lies underneath that is like, we will simplify a whole bunch to make sure this game gets released in a certain amount of time. I mean, people look at how much needs to be done for the game to come out, and that's why everyone's like, oh, it's going to take 3, 4, 5 years, right? But the other side of the coin is like, well, what if they are going to go the route that they've really always been against, which was like, we have the time, we have the resources, we have the freedom to work on these things so we don't have to compromise to release them. And what if they are now saying, hey, we're going to set this date, which does need to happen at some point. Not going to tell you never need to set dates for yourselves and actually meet that goal. But what if we are looking at gameplay possibly being sacrificed so that can be done? And a system like medical might settle here. This might be it. And they're just like, we're going to polish it for the next 2 years and it'll be ready for 1.0. And then we'll release stuff post 1.0.
I would be okay with that if. Listen to me. They're probably CIG is watching this. They're like, oh, let's see
what we got him.
Let's see what he's okay with. Oh, he's not okay with this. Guys, fix it. Yeah. I would be okay with that if they restored beacons, and not just medical rescue beacons. Medical assistance was that catch-all beacon that you could use for a variety of things, right? And then you communicate further with somebody in chat and narrow down what you need. Hey, my arm's broken, or I need a tractor, a tractor beam. Can you bring one? Or, transport beacons. A lot of people like that loop, and it's completely almost independent from medical, though. If you're stranded in space, you're going to die anyway. So I guess that's kind of tied in. But reintroducing beacons, and making them a more viable option than respawn, with the promise of ironing out, quotation fingers, of ironing out the bugs that affect it, response, and implementing these features in the new social system, reputation and leaderboard and all that stuff, or the things that we talked about. Yeah, I mean, I don't know when that system's going to come in. That seems to be enormous. Oh, it's plugged into Spectrum. It keeps track of all these players. There's a block list. There's a this. There's a that, and it draws data from mission completion and how the mission was completed, and a player's input on how you did. That's a lot of wires to be connected behind the screen. So I don't know when that's going to come out.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to, for medical to be on people's minds, it has to be back in the game. It has to be an option, and where it goes from there, I'm going to hope for one thing. My arch nemesis on Spectrum, the Great Dane, is going to hope for another thing. And we're going to both sit here with bated breath and wait to see what comes out after 1.0, if that were the case, right? But it has to be put back in. People have to go, okay, here's this thing that I can do as a player, and here's this thing that I can use to call for help or a ride if I'm in need of one. And let people create that gameplay. You remember that Siege of Orison rescue when the shuttles broke? That
Dude.
was a fun time. It was organic,
Folks, that
emergent
was
gameplay.
so
You
good.
can't get that anywhere else in Star Citizen or a lot of other games. You never, and with the bugs provide some of the best gameplay for medics. If you're stuck, you don't need to backspace all the time. Most of the time, someone can come there and get you out, and you might even enjoy it. You might even enjoy the experience, and you learn something too, how to get someone out of a wall, that sort of stuff. So at the very least, it has to be put back in the game, and it has to be functioning on par with the way it was in like 3.19 and before, when these things actually worked consistently. Put personal transport beacons back. You were able to use those to find your ship if you got separated from it. You would set your ship as a destination, and the player who took the beacon would be able to quantum to that location and take you back to your ship. A lot of these beacons were good for working around bugs, but keeping players in the fight. Now, again, you still have to respect the player's time, and we still have to put in a system that keeps people who aren't going to be heavily motivated to do as well as they can to get to you as fast as possible, whatever the need is. You got to keep those people out. You have to keep them from accidentally, getting these beacons. And I don't know if that's all going to be done before 1.0, but at the very least, you just got to turn beacons back on, because that has to be in people's minds. It has to be in the game, and people have to see that it exists. Otherwise, by the time we get to 1.0, people are going to be like, medical what? Oh, you mean this red ship I have that I respawn in? No one's going to care. And it's going to be tough reintroducing something that's existed in the game for so many years, so far down the line with a whole swath of new players.
So it sounds like the mechanics you see are sound. You just need the system around them to be polished.
Yeah, at its most basic level, people go, oh, medical's never been in the game. Well, no, medical that you think should be in the game hasn't been in the game, but it
Same
existed.
thing with exploration.
It's just basic. Yeah, you can go fly out in a single direction and be like, I found nothing. And you've explored, congratulations. But that's still exploration, and responding to player beacons is still medical. You're just not starting an IV or, checking to see if their spine's broken with your hand. You know what I mean? Like, you're not feeling for crepitus in the neck, but it's still there, and it's been there, and people liked it, and people engaged with it, and it needs to come back, lest we forget that it existed.
All right, I've got
also,
one.
respawn's not medical.
Yes, we gotta make sure. I may make that the title of this episode. I have one more question for you. Then this is more surrounding something that folks in the supporters chat have been talking about a little bit here. It came from a topic that we were having though. How many drugs do you think would make for? I mean, you said that you really just want to see things kind of tidied up, but if they were going to expand things a little bit by adding more drugs in, how many you think would make for a very in-depth, like just very standout medical system that is above and beyond other games?
Oof, above and beyond. I don't know about that. I would say they'd have to keep things. I'm going to use the S word, but they're going to have to keep things simple. Unless they. I really don't know, and I think about this a lot. It doesn't keep me awake at night or anything, but it's something that I've wondered where they could go, because if you look on Spectrum, there's a lot of really good threads about this from guys like Nurseman, who have gone through the possibilities of a more complex medical system, including different equipment, specialized backpacks that preclude you from carrying loot and all this other stuff. Like, really a way to specialize and silo into doing medical as a player. But I don't know what they would put in. I mean, you have different body systems, but it's just medicine's both simple and complex. It can be addressing a lot of basic things and getting a great outcome, or discovering that you need, more advanced interventions. And to distill that down into, I don't know, most players are wearing armor. So, I mean, I don't see taking off armor and starting IVs or anything like that. If think we'd stick with pens and beams. But as far as meds go, if they gave a purpose to those other ones, because right now you just use the med gun or the hemazole, it heals you up as far as it can, given your tiered injuries, and you use the advanced mode of the med gun to mask symptoms and effects from the tier 3, tier 2, tier 1 injuries, which makes you fine for a time. I don't know. I think they would just have to play around with that and make it to where you would have to make more deliberate decisions on what to use. So maybe the purple pen has to be used to treat this thing, but maybe you have to prioritize in order of severity. Maybe their leg is a tier 2, but their arm is a tier 3. Okay, well, if I choose to treat the leg, I cannot treat the arm out here in the field because their blood drug level will be too high and you'll cause harm to the player. So maybe that's what hooks us back into needing a medical bed, like we discussed earlier. Okay, the only way we can fully heal you is to get you back. But in the meantime, if you can deal with a tier 3 arm injury and a little worse aim, at least I fixed your leg long enough for you to continue through this facility. So as far as that would just be field medicine, really, and a more advanced level of that I don't think would take too much time for the player. It would just be players learning that, okay, I can't combine these two drugs, so I need to decide which injury is most severe or which injuries are most severe and only treat those. This way I keep them from blacking out and they can stay in the fight or whatever activity they're doing until I can get them back to a med bed. I think that would be a way to do complexity for medical.
Cool. Well, thank you for your inputs. Thank you for your chat, dude. Thanks for joining me for this show. I hope people got a lot of good insight into how this medical gameplay affects people who do this more on the regular. The Beacon guy. Do you have an exact number of how many of these rescues you have tabulated?
No, I threw out the piece of notebook paper, but I'm somewhere hovering around 3,000.
Not bad.
Yeah, I wish I had started the sheet when I first started. I mean, but it's been so fun. It's been so fun. I mean, you remember just stepping off the ramp of your ship at a mining outpost and dying. The wind blew you over and you died. You remember your ship, you left the engines on and now it's 500 meters in the air. You had to call someone to come out and land on top of your ship to push it back down to the ground. Like, there was so much activity. There was so much to do, and thousands of players use these things on a regular basis and thousands of other players responded to them, and it was a wholesome symbiotic relationship, except for the onesies and twosies.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate it nonetheless. Any last bits you want to, or actually, can you let people know where they can find all your rescues? Because they are recorded. I think that is the best part, is like, it's all very provable.
Yeah, I'm on YouTube, same name here, AAK625. And all the other links, link to the spreadsheet should be in there. It's Stat Citizen, star, but with a T, statcitizen.com. It goes to a Google sheet. I'm not on Twitch, just on YouTube.
All right, man. Hey, well, thank you. Thank you for the work that you do. Folks, go check out that Stat Citizen. Look at the YouTube videos down below. And if you did enjoy this podcast and you find yourself on Spotify, maybe throw us a little rate and tell us how you thought it went. If you're on YouTube, leave a comment. Or if you don't like ads, because YouTube does that all the time, you can also check out audio platforms across anything, really. Amazon, Apple, I use Pocket Casts, whatever it might be. But once again, thank you, AAK, for being here. Have a wonderful day. And thank you all for listening. If you're seeing this, like I said, we are long gone. But hopefully none of this is very out of date. Either way, I'll see you all next week.